Hi there. I'd like to talk about a couple of scenarios that you may be familiar with as educators. These are both things that I experienced as a parent of kids going through K through 12 education over the past couple of years. So here's the first scenario. One of our children was in a class where the teacher had helped write the test that they would be taking at the end of the class. So she said, I know a lot about this subject matter, and it's really important that we get all of this information from the textbook into the heads of our learners. And I'm really good at doing that. I'm going to cram it in there. It's going to be great. And as you can imagine, after that happened, we had kind of a, well, how do I describe it? It's kind of a rough year for that particular learner, right? It wasn't terribly engaging. It was kind of long. Here's scenario number two. And in this scenario, we had a teacher say, this year, we're going to be talking about Greece. And as we talk about Greece, we're going to be talking about Euclid when we talk about math. We're going to be talking about books by Rick Riordan, and we're going to be talking about Greek mythology. We're going to be talking about the Parthenon, and we're going to do a Greek tragedy performance as part of this class that we're putting together. So as you can imagine, my kids were pretty excited about this particular class. And as they thought about it, right, they were pretty stoked to be able to put a play together, to build a Parthenon, to do all these things. And they learned similar material in this class as they did in the first scenario. But my question is, which one was more engaging? I think engagement is really critical. And that's kind of the theme that I'm going to be talking about as I speak on sketchnoting for visual engagement for K through 12. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we engage learners and ways that we can get them to be inspired and hopefully help people understand, like, this is how we get people to pay attention, to enjoy the work that they're doing. And hopefully I can also demonstrate how this works as I go through my presentation. So, as I say, I am Tim May. I am the creative director at an organization called XPLANE. I have been using Wacom products since 1999. That's when I got my first tablet. It was amazing. I remember way back in 99 just thinking, I can do anything with this. And that I was able to really expand my digital art capabilities at a time when digital art was becoming a thing. So the place that I work, XPLANE, is a design consultancy. And as a consultancy, we really help solve organizational challenges through art and design. So the sketch notes that you're going to see that are a source for my drawings today are the type of things that we do for organizations, but in a manner to kind of help people change, to help people work better. So we like to say that we lead the world at leading change through people. And that we've been doing this since 93. I haven't been with XPLANE since 93, but the company's been around for a while. So this methodology works, and it's worked for a long time. Now, what I just shared was kind of maybe a little bit of consultant speak. So let me try and break it down a little more clearly so you can understand specifically what it is I do. And that should give you a little understanding of hopefully the efficacy of what I'm going to be saying today and sharing. So when my company does work, when XPLANE works, it looks like this. We begin with a discovery session. And in that discovery session, there's a lot of co-creation, people working together. And we ask these people, the CFOs, the CEOs, people who are deep inside organizations, inside their operations and people programs, to draw. And drawing is really key to the work that we do because it allows us to share ideas in a way that aren't necessarily limited by language. It allows us to kind of get out of our normal method of communication. And we ask people to draw, and those ideas are gathered and collected. And then I take those ideas after we've drawn for a while, and I start to come up with, like, all right, so how would I represent those ideas? What are some of the best ways to redraw those? Because I do have some training in this. And then we get into our design phase. So from discovery to design, we take those ideas and then we start to polish those ideas. So we start to say, all right, we kind of liked idea B, but with a little bit of C. So we're going to take those ideas over here. We're going to polish them a little bit and try to make them work. And then we start to produce them. So we get into production. And each of these phases is iterative, right? That we're going to try something and cycle through a few times to make sure it's working. So as we get into this production phase, then we try and figure out, well, based on the people that we need to have change and how they think and learn and work, what's the best vehicle to kind of accelerate that change? What's the thing that's going to help them really absorb this material, learn from it, and take action? And we don't necessarily measure ourselves on how pretty the thing we built is. We measure ourselves on, were we able to help people change behaviors? That's really critical for getting people to learn and work effectively together. The other thing we try to consider is the organic nature of organizations. I also just get to show off some beautiful like sketches that I did as a part of my preparation. But really, you think about organizations as organic, right? That for so long we've thought of organizations as hierarchical and machine-like. This person reports to this person. You have these three reports, these over here. And I think that one of the things that type of thinking does is it kind of limits how we work within organizations. If you think of an organization as a little bit more of a connected series of people that work in an ecosystem, and if you think about one part of it and changing one part of it, that's going to have ripple effects in other parts of that organization. So enough about organizational behavior and change, but that gives you a little bit of a background for what I am and what I do day to day. So one of the things that I run into when we're asking these executives to start drawing is we have to get them to think a little bit differently about what drawing is. And there's a phrase that I hear all the time, and that phrase is, I can't draw. And I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this have said this before. I only draw stick figures. I don't draw very well. This is not something I'm good at. That's your job. And I think that this kind of thinking is limiting, and I'm going to challenge it as I get into the rest of this presentation, because I think that when you say you can't draw, what you really mean is you're not comfortable drawing, and you've decided to stop drawing as a way of exploring the world. So as you join me today, and my hope is that you'll jump in on the parachute like the little character I've drawn up here. My hope is that my first tip, find your inner 4-year-old. There was a time in your life when you used drawing to explore your world. It was one of the things that you would do that kind of helped you understand how the world worked. And so as you were, you remember, like you probably don't, but if you're a parent, you might remember how children, you give them crayons, and that can be hours of just sort of meditative entertainment. They can work, and it was something that was a place of discovery, a place of joy at one point in your life. So I want to talk about building visual literacy now. So building on that concept of finding that place of joy and discovery in drawing. As everyone knows, literacy means the ability to read and to write. And when it comes to our visual literacy, your brain is hardwired to read visual input. So that what I'm saying when I say hardwired to read visual input, what I mean is our brain has this amazing eyeball that's kind of an outgrowth of the brain, and that connects to a visual cortex. And these parts of our brain are, they process images really quickly, and that goes way back in human history. So if you think about kind of the power of visuals and the power of vision, and I've drawn Vision Man here with the cheesy eyeball and the big muscles. So if you hear something, if you're given a presentation and you hear it, and you add 3 days. So I've heard this thing, that there was something that came to me, I experienced it, I heard it, and 3 days later, I'm going to remember about 10% of what I heard. Now, same presentation, add imagery, add pictures to that presentation. 3 days later, you're going to remember more like 65% of that presentation, because the images embed in our brains. We're hardwired for this. This is also known as the picture superiority effect. But another thought, just as far as human history, right? In the human history of communication, we've been using words for 3,700, 4,000 years, putting words together to create meaning. But we've been communicating for over 30,000 years. And that humans have been communicating for a lot longer than we've had words and sentences to be able to do so. And you think about some of these early examples of ways that we were communicating with each other without necessarily a written language. It goes way back, and our brains have a lot more time working on this visual communication than we have with actual written communication. So Oh, one other thought that I had here that was interesting. When you say I see, right? What does that mean? That actually means I understand. So that in English, the word for seeing is almost the same thing as understanding. So that when we see things, we understand them. By saying that, we mean it. So getting back to this concept of literacy, we know that our eyeballs are really good at where they're hardwired, really good at reading visual input. But writing, we get back to that phrase, I can't draw, okay? But you can write your own name. So let's think about what it takes to actually write your name. My name is Timothy, Timothy. I'd like to get a bell, like a little ding. Good job, Tim. What did I just do? I arranged a series of glyphs in an order that allows us to create a sound and make meaning. All right? I just arranged. Now, each one of these glyphs is kind of arbitrary and abstract, right? Like the alphabet is just a series of shapes or a series of pictures that you put together in a certain order to create meaning. So you've already had experience drawing because you know how to write. You already have the first steps of being visually literate. All right? And what do I mean by that? Well, our founder, Dave Gray, felt like in being visually literate, it's too late to just say, all right, everyone go to art school and learn how to draw like Tim. No, we don't need you to do that. You don't have to draw well for drawing to be a very effective tool in your communication. But let's jumpstart your ability to draw quickly by, instead of saying you have to learn chiaroscuro and measure with your thumb and learn all of these kind of fancy techniques for being able to draw, what I want you to do instead is think about just these 12 shapes as a visual alphabet, a place to start, where you can start thinking about like drawing in a manner, not so much that you have to be good at a lot of things, but let's just be good at one or two things. So point, line, arc. Those are the first three letters of the visual alphabet. And you can actually draw pretty much anything with those three letters, right? That if you take those three shapes and put them together, you can draw just about anything. Angle is taking two lines and putting them together. Spiral is an arc moving a little bit further. Loop goes a little bit further than that. These are sort of what we'd think of as the open shapes on the top. And then below, we have the closed shapes of the visual alphabet. Circle, oval or eye shape, triangle, rectangle, polygon, house shape, and cloud. If you can make these shapes, you can draw anything that you will have seen in my presentation today. And as you get more comfortable with it and combining them in different ways, you're able to actually make a lot of expressive things happen and build up your visual literacy. So this is sort of an on-ramp, a rapid on-ramp to being able to be expressive through visuals. So let's start with a couple of examples. Say I want to draw a coffee, okay? So which elements am I going to take? Well, I'm going to start with the top of the coffee cup. I'll pull that line from over here, right? And then I'm going to put an arc below it. All right, so there's an arc. I'm going to put another arc on the other side of this. And let's make it a fancy coffee cup with a couple lines in there, a couple more lines. And then I'm going to add two more lines to imply that the coffee is hot and delicious. And I'll put an oval underneath to give it the appearance of a saucer, all right? Very quickly, I've started to put some of these elements together in a way that when our brain sees it, it reads coffee, all right? Next example, emojis. I kind of love emojis in this example because part of what you think about of emojis is they replace tone of voice in a text conversation, right? You can put an emoji at the end of something that might have been very offensive, and all of a sudden it's funny because you've changed the context of that conversation. And it's amazing what you can do by just taking, I've taken the circle shape to create the outside shape of the emojis. And then as we think about very simple ways of showing, right? Let's do a couple of arcs, right? Couple of arcs, add one more arc. This is using only two letters of the visual alphabet, but I've conveyed quite a bit of emotion in this, just really quick example. I love the oh crap face, right? Big circles, let's put a couple of dots in the middle. And all of a sudden, we've created a lot of emotion, right? And this time, I've only used two shapes once again. I've repeated the circle 4 times and then two points, 2 dots in the middle, and then we've created it, right? If I want to sort of take a couple of arcs here, arc, 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 line, 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 line. Let's go back to our arc. Okay, now we have our love emoji, right? So now we've been able to make some cool shapes and ideas just out of this visual alphabet as a place to kind of start. Um, Next, so let's say we want to get a little more complex and draw a goose. All right, well, I'm going to start with a circle. I'm going to put another circle inside the circle, and I'm going to put a dot so that we've got an eyeball. All right, now I'm going to do another arc here and another arc here, and I'm going to put a couple of lines next to it. I'm going to draw a circle for the body. All right, I'm going to draw a semi-cloud to make a wing, right? There's some probably feet going down. We can put a little tail on it, but put a couple lines to show that it's honking. And now in drawing humans, I have a pretty simple recipe that I use to draw people. I often need to draw very quickly. And so I try to reduce it to the elements that I think are most important. So when I draw people, I like to start with a big round head, and I usually do kind of a small body. I usually think of a couple of like slightly curved lines for eyeballs, a nice mouth. Sometimes we put a nose on there. It doesn't really matter. But then, let's put a ponytail on, some arms, and now I've quickly done a person, and it conveys everything I need it to convey, right? That I can kind of show that this person is happy, sad. I can make a lot of different emotions just by adding a couple of lines to the shapes that I have here. And so this is one of the methods that I often use just to draw people. And another thing that's valuable about this method is, let's say the person's running. Well, what happens to the body shape when the person's running? It actually gets turned on its side. We're going to put the head forward a little bit. This person's going to be exerting, so the nose is forward. They're like breathing a little bit heavy. And then this arm is going to be coming up and forward. The other arm is going to be coming back and down. This leg is going to be coming up like this. The other leg's coming back. And now we sort of get that impression that this person's moving fairly quickly. And one of the things that works about this is with that box as the body, the place where the shoulders and legs come from are always the corners of that box, right? That there are those four corners there that can spring from. So a couple of other examples and thoughts as you start to work this way. I like to be able to do sketchnoting very quickly. And that's partly because I'm trying to understand what's going on and I want to remember what's going on, right? The act of drawing kind of helps me remember what I'm seeing. And so a lot of times we use this Egyptian perspective where you can kind of see elements on the front of the face, but we've put the body sort of at a sideways perspective. But you sort of think about that flattening out the perspective, not trying to get all fancy and think about like, well, where's the light shining on that object and how do we do the shadow, and the shadow gets cast over here. And now we just trying to think simply. So with that concept of thinking simply, we've got like a person at a desk here. Well, I don't need to show a lot of perspective to show that this person is working at a desk, right? I can probably just do 3 lines here to indicate that this person is at a desk, right? So there they are at the desk, and I want to show that they're working on a keyboard. So let's do one more line for the keyboard, and I'll add a screen. So I can go like this to show, all right, this person is working at a desk. There's a screen. Let's remember our coffee cup. Let's put another coffee cup on that table. Boom, looking pretty good. Now, let's say that I needed to move the coffee cup over and show what's on that screen, that there was something important that I wanted people to see about that. Well, it's not terribly difficult. I'll go to my Egyptian perspective again and show the screen at an angle. And this way I can kind of, show our audience, like, this is what's happening on this screen right here. And it's important because, now I've put, here's another trick, by the way. If you want to make something look like a screen, put a box inside a box. All of a sudden it reads screen to your eyeball, right? And now, we can talk about, right, this person's talking about this map, and over here's the lake, and they want to get here, and the path is going to take them all the way over here. Now I'm starting to add a couple of these details to make this interesting image a little more interesting, but still trying to keep it simple as far as the way I think about it. So a couple of other tips as we go through this. Another thing that comes along with time is you start to build your library of frequently used icons. So think about the things in your world that you have to draw frequently, things that are pretty regular, right? That if I'm an educator, I probably am drawing pencils. I've got papers. I've got equations. Whatever it is the presentation is about, you can kind of think about those elements and then just start to draw them very quickly. There's another nice little tip here where if you have a gray marker and use that gray marker, that's also a nice way to kind of just add a little dimensionality to your drawings. It's one of the things that separates people who do this a lot from people who don't do it as often, is having that secondary color is nice to just sort of add a little emphasis, add a little shadow, add a little bit of intrigue to what you're sharing. So in going through what we've got here, a document, mobile phone, email, chat, agreement, inquiry, this is our release of this project. This is the update of this product, approval, rejection, improvement, and then editing. The reason I put editing at the end here is once you get a knack for this, you start to combine these ideas, right? The editing is basically the document, and then I've added just, I've added a pencil to the side of the document. So it starts to make a little more sense in that regard. The fifth tip that I wanted to share is label everything that you draw. That way, even if your drawings aren't necessarily realistic, you'll be able to remember it. And the nice thing is the words next to the image, no matter who looks at it, they'll be able to put one and one together and realize, oh, this is a this, right? So having the word next to the drawing, a lot of times when I teach visual thinking and teach people to start this, they say, look at all these drawings and there's no words. And everyone's, like when you start, you're not necessarily very good at it. And so it's like, oh, what is that? Put the word under it and it solves the problem. So you're able to kind of give your audience an ability to understand it in two ways. Another big part of sketchnoting is lettering. And lettering is about being able to just make, write in a way that makes sense, that's fairly legible. One of the reasons that I'm able to share my slides as a giant drawing with a bunch of my marks on it and no fonts or pre-made documents is that I've been doing this for a little while. But one of the things that I think in the back of my head whenever I'm lettering is that there's this underlying grid for almost all of the block letters that I would use. So I recommend using block letters, writing in all caps because it's easier for people to see. And the other thing that's nice about all caps is, right, if you're using mixed case, right, you've got these J's and these G's and these other letters that kind of go below the line and some go above the line. All caps are all predictable sizes and shapes. And so when I think about lettering in this manner, right, that if I just go lettering L, E, T, T, E, this is really exciting, R, I, N, G. I've kind of got those ideas in the back of my head when I'm lettering without these guides. One little note here, if you're going to do an M or a W, they're just a little bit wider, right? That those take up a little bit more space. But most of your letters are a fairly predictable size and shape. So just kind of thinking about that as you're starting to do lettering. The other thing that I'm often doing is I'm capturing ideas and people are talking in real time and it's really fast and I'm trying to draw, is I don't always realize immediately what's important and what's not important. So a lot of times as I start to hear they talk about something that I'd already heard, I'll go back and do things to designate something as a title, right, to show that this kind of stands out. So in showing titles, right, one of the things that's important is showing, all right, this is a banner. So I'll just draw a couple of lines quickly around the outside, start with a box, and then I do this little line that's a little ways in from the left and right edges, a connecting line, go around that, and now it feels more important because I put a banner around it, right? That this makes it stand out. Another way to do that is just a simple box with a shadow on one edge, right? Put a box around that word, put the shadow on one edge so it starts to stand out a little bit. The cloud, as I mentioned before, this is another way that you can, quickly draw attention to a particular element. Often when we're doing this in real time with people on whiteboards or on big sheets of paper, I've got one colored marker that I can use to quickly, draw some of that detailed information that I want to share. Putting a wavy line underneath the thing that you're talking about, that's another way to kind of quickly draw attention to it, get people to pay attention to it. The double line is a really nice one. A lot of great sketchnoters, Mike Rode and Rody, and some of these other people who have done this for a very long time would recommend kind of doubling up the text in a way that just makes it feel a little more, right, that there's sort of a nice effect there by just making a couple double lines in a way that adds some sort of weight to it, right? Feels a little more important. The other thing that I've done here is that I've added the shadow. And one of the ways that I think about shadowing is if you just imagine like you're shining a little flashlight on one side of this. And so which way is the shadow being cast? right? That's sort of the way I think about adding this little shading on one edge of it, the little shadow. Another thing that will stand out is if you can remember how to do script, cursive is also something that just draws people attention, right? That you can see the script there, makes people want to look at it. Outlines are also really good. We've got more of these kind of tips and tricks for ways to make words and titles stand out. So that kind of has to do with the lettering when you're capturing letters as you start to do some sketchnoting. The other thing I want to share is a couple of drawing hacks. So these are tricks that designers, illustrators, sketchnoters use to make their work look a little more appealing. And so these are just a couple of cartoonist tricks that we use to try to make things look a little more like we want it to look engaging. So how do we bring up the engagement? Well, there are lots of things that we do that just kind of trick your brain a little bit, right? The brick fence hack, I've only drawn about 7 lines on this fence, but it reads as a brick fence. Your brain is putting together all the space between the one side of the fence and the other, right? So you can kind of see that there's this big chasm in between these two parts of the fence, but your brain is sort of gluing those things together. Directional lines, right? So you've got an object here where you're trying to show that there's some dimensionality. Well, think about what direction those lines are going, right? On this one, the lines are going this way. So that's just another kind of way to help give things a little texture, spruce up your drawings a little bit to make them kind of cool. The cookie cracker hacker. So here, I'm doing slightly different things to each of these round shapes in order to show that we've got maybe a Ritz cracker, a chocolate chip cookie, or a sugar cookie. And the slightly different treatment of each of those little textures gives your brain the clue that, oh, I can recognize this as one or the other or the other. So a couple of other little hacks. We've got Nessie here, the water hack, right? Doing a couple of these lines around the object to make it appear that it's coming out of the water. The magnet hack, showing these directional lines, showing that there's some attraction coming to the magnet. That's kind of a cool way to do it. The apple pie hack, just it's the same thing we did with the coffee, right? But trying to show that something is hot by adding some of those lines and getting people to think, ooh, I want to take a bite of that. So in moving on to some final thoughts. So hopefully what this has been a demonstration of for you has been the fact that the act of drawing creates engagement, right? That as you draw on something, it just kind of makes your eye want to look at it. So the fact that I'm drawing in real time and presenting while I'm drawing, hopefully that gives you a sense of like, oh, this is fun, this is engaging, I want to look at this. And that's obviously something that we're always competing for when it comes to young learners. This is particularly true for remote learning, right? That if you have remote teaching and learning going on, and you're trying to get people to really buy in, then it's important to think about like, what is their experience, right? What does it look like for them as they're experiencing this? So doing this in real time is not as difficult as it once was. So the on-ramp to working this way is actually fairly quick and fairly affordable. And so you think about, right, just using paper and an overhead is one way to do it. You can make an overhead camera super cheap by just taking your iPhone and getting a little arm for it and plugging it in. So that's one way you can just show yourself drawing on paper. But I've also recently acquired the Wacom One. This thing is marvelous. This is a great little tool. And my son is using it most of the time because he likes it for his math. Because he enjoys being able to kind of draw out his math answers and he's tired of having to scan his math pages in and send them as a PDF in his remote work. So just like having these tools really helps in being able to create engagement for your learners. A couple of other thoughts, right? Even if you're working in PowerPoint, which a lot of us have to use PowerPoint. That's how a lot of the business world runs. You can enable pens in PowerPoint that would allow you to use your Wacom tablet, and that way you can draw directly on the images that you're presenting. And just the way I am right here, it just builds up a little bit of interest, right? That you can just kind of see, even if you're doodling, people start to say, "Oh, those doodles are kind of nice. What's he drawing? What is he putting together there?" So a couple of other things that I think are really valuable. Shared workspaces also create engagement. Mural is a company, I think it's mural.co, where you can put a bunch of stickies up on the page, you can draw on it, and you can get multiple people involved at the same time. Another thing for remote engagement is use your breakout rooms. Get people to break out and get them to kind of engage in that way. So a couple of final thoughts here. In your next meeting, no matter what it is, no matter who you're talking to, just start drawing. Um, have a pen and paper ready. Like if you can get like a Wacom tablet, like take some visual notes, you'll see that all of a sudden you will remember the things that you've taken notes with a little bit longer. Your drawings will actually help you more than immaculately written notes where you're capturing every word. Try to capture the concepts and think if you can capture those concepts visually. It's going to help sort of improve your memory of the things that you learned. So hopefully I've inspired some people today. Hopefully this has been fun. Just in closing, I'm Tim. My organization is XPLANE.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Insta. You can find me on Twitter @FreshBeast. I've had a lot of fun presenting this today. Hopefully it was valuable for you. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you. And I'll catch you later.